They called it silence, but it was strength. They mistook it for submission, but it was power. There's a force rising quietly in the hearts of those who live not for applause, but for purpose. A spirit unshaken by chaos, unmoved by pressure, because it's anchored in something eternal. The world doesn't talk about it, but today we will. There's something that modern culture doesn't talk about, something it doesn't want to acknowledge, a force that's not loud, but it's fierce, not flashy, but unshakably firm. And it's this, the discipline, depth, and spiritual resilience of the Muslim spirit. In a world that's loud with noise, distractions, and impulses pulling from every direction, there is a quiet power that comes from the ability to say no to the self. To wake up before the sun, not for productivity hacks or biohacks, but to bow in prayer. To fast not for diet trends, but for soul alignment. To turn the heart away from lust, greed, and ego, not because it's easy, but because it's right. What kind of strength does it take to silence the body so the spirit can speak louder? It's a strength that doesn't flex for applause, it doesn't need attention, it's built in solitude, it's tested in temptation. And it's proven when no one else is watching. The world may not understand it. That's why it fears it. Because when a person submits not to culture, not to cravings, but to something higher, there's a kind of freedom there that can't be manipulated. That's the kind of spirit that doesn't get addicted to approval, that doesn't bow to systems, that doesn't sell out for comfort. That kind of spirit is dangerous to a world built on distraction and self-indulgence. And yet it's also deeply misunderstood, because strength like this doesn't show off, it doesn't scream, it doesn't demand the spotlight, it simply stands firm, it prays when others panic, it lowers its gaze when others stare. It remembers death when others chase vanity, and it finds joy, not in possessions or popularity, but in peace with the Creator. There is untold power in the Muslim spirit, the power to conquer the self before trying to conquer the world. The power to turn down desire and choose discipline. The power to walk away from what's easy and submit to what's eternal. You want to talk about spiritual strength, that's it. Not just believing in something bigger, but structuring your entire life around it. From the food you eat, to the words you speak, to the time you wake, and the way you walk, everything becomes an act of purpose. That's what modern culture can't quite comprehend. Because this isn't about ritual for ritual's sake. It's about mastery of the soul, and it doesn't come from ego. It comes from submission, and I don't mean a weak submission. I mean a warrior's submission. A bold, conscious, empowered decision to let go of self, rule and live under divine rule. It takes guts to go against the grain. It takes strength to stop chasing what everyone else is chasing. It takes clarity to see through the illusions of modern freedom and recognize that true freedom begins with discipline. You can lift weights, you can run miles, you can conquer mountains, but if you can't conquer your own soul, your own thoughts, your own urges, you're still a prisoner. But when your soul is anchored, when your discipline is rooted in faith, when your life is aligned with purpose, that's a strength that doesn't shake when the world shakes. That's the untold power they don't want to talk about. But it's real, it's rising, and it's rooted deep in the spirit of those who don't follow the crowd, because they're following something greater. There's something incredibly powerful about a person who has disciplined their soul. Not just their schedule or their habits, but their very essence. A person who doesn't just move through life reacting to the world around them, but instead lives with purpose, intention, and alignment. That's the kind of strength most people never even talk about, because it's not loud, it doesn't shout for attention, it just shows up every day with quiet consistency, it bends the knee when no one is watching. It controls the tongue when emotions rise. It steps away from temporary pleasure to hold on to eternal values. That kind of spirit, disciplined, obedient, unshaken, isn't just rare, it's feared, because you can't manipulate someone whose loyalty isn't to the world. You can't sway a soul that answers to something higher than human approval. There's something unsettling to the modern mind about people who willingly choose to live under divine command. While the culture tells you to follow your heart, obey your instincts, and chase your desires, there is a different kind of person walking a very different path, a path of self-denial, a path of spiritual awakening, a path that doesn't depend on applause or affirmation, but on sacred duty. That person doesn't need to broadcast their beliefs to feel validated. They don't live for likes or trends. Their stability comes from something deeper. They pray not just because it's a ritual, but because it's a reset. They fast not because they're trying to get fit, but because they're training their soul. They submit not because they're weak, but because they're strong enough to surrender. This world honors rebellion, but struggles to understand submission. And yet, real power begins when ego ends. That's why a truly disciplined spiritual life is both misunderstood and deeply magnetic. Because in a sea of people running toward what feels good, the one who walks toward what is good, even when it's hard, stands out. They carry a presence that's unbothered, a steadiness that's rare, a focus that makes others pause. The kind of person who knows when to speak and when to be silent, when to engage and when to walk away. That comes from alignment with something greater than impulse. It comes from structure, from devotion, from reverence. And that's something the modern world can't easily comprehend, because it's not driven by ego but by faith. It's not rooted in personal gain but in sacred purpose. It's not motivated by performance but by peace. When you see someone who lives this way, who rises early not for hustle culture, but to stand before their Creator, you're witnessing a different breed of strength. The kind that doesn't crumble under pressure because it's been tested in private. The kind that doesn't beg for attention because it's secure in its identity. The kind that's grounded in values that don't shift with trends or tides. And in a world that thrives on chaos, that kind of peace is intimidating. Because it's not common, it's not manufactured, it can't be bought, and it can't be faked. It's forged in silence, it's refined through sacrifice, it's shaped by obedience, not ambition. And it's precisely that spirit, a spirit of unwavering submission, powerful restraint, and deep internal order, that challenges the modern way of life. It holds up a mirror to a culture addicted to freedom without boundaries. And when that mirror is held up, it exposes just how fragile and shallow so much of the world's definition of strength really is. Because when temptation knocks and distraction calls, it's not talent or charisma that saves you. It's discipline, it's resolve, it's a soul anchored in something eternal. That's the untold power they don't teach in schools or show on screens. It's quiet, it's firm. And it's alive in those who have chosen to let go of the self and grab hold of something far greater. You don't hear much about it on mainstream platforms. It's not trending in pop culture. But those who pay attention, those who really look beneath the surface, can't ignore it. There's something deeply unsettling to the modern world about people who are spiritually disciplined, especially when that discipline comes from a belief system that refuses to bend, refuses to dilute, and refuses to apologize for its devotion. It's not loud, but it's steady, not aggressive, but it's strong. And when you see it up close, it makes you stop and think, because this kind of discipline isn't motivated by fame, money, or social validation. It's fueled by a sense of duty to something sacred, something eternal, something greater than the self. Imagine waking up before the world even turns the lights on, not because you have to, but because your soul is committed to meeting its Creator in stillness. Picture someone refraining from food and drink from sunrise to sunset, not for health or image, but to sharpen the spirit, to humble the body, and to recalibrate the heart. That's not just commitment. That's spiritual strength, and in a society that celebrates indulgence, that kind of restraint looks like rebellion. The modern world can't quite grasp the idea that someone would willingly say no to their own desires for the sake of their soul. But those who do live with an inner peace that can't be manufactured, a presence that doesn't come from personality, but from deep inner clarity, that's why it's feared. Because when you encounter someone who has silenced the noise of the world to hear the whisper of the divine, you're looking at someone the system can't control. You can't tempt them with power. You can't bribe them with pleasure. You can't threaten them with loneliness. They've already learned to walk alone. They've already trained themselves to find joy in obedience and strength in surrender. And when a person reaches that level of internal order, they become dangerous to chaos. Not because they fight with fists or words, but because they carry peace like a sword. Because when everyone else is shaken, they are still. When everyone else is chasing, they are anchored. When the world moves in confusion, they walk in clarity. It's not the kind of power that's explosive or theatrical. It's the kind that builds in silence, that forms in prayer, that grows in the dark where no one's watching, and when it finally shows itself, it doesn't come to impress. It comes to witness. It shows the world that it's possible to live with conviction, to build your life around values that don't shift with culture, to submit to something higher and not lose yourself, but find yourself. This kind of spirit challenges everything we're told to admire. We're taught to follow our heart, chase every desire, and define truth on our own terms. But what happens when someone refuses that narrative? When they live not to satisfy themselves, but to serve something greater, it makes you question what real freedom looks like. Is freedom really doing whatever you want, or is it being strong enough to walk away from what you don't need? That's the untold power of a disciplined spirit. It doesn't just say no to the world. It says yes to purpose, yes to meaning, yes to a life that's not just reactive, but sacred. And when that spirit is rooted in ancient truths, when it draws its strength from divine instructions rather than human opinion, it becomes unshakable. It's not thrown off by criticism. It's not lured by distraction. It knows who it is, why it's here, and where it's going, and in a world full of wandering, that kind of certainty is rare, that kind of clarity is radical, that kind of life is not just admired, it's respected, studied, and sometimes even feared. They say strength is loud, that power makes noise, but the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones who don't need to prove anything to anyone. Their presence speaks before their mouth does. Their calm unsettles the chaos around them. And that's the kind of energy you feel when you encounter someone who's living with deep spiritual conviction. It's not about charisma or physical dominance. It's about something within, a fire that doesn't flicker with every wind of opinion, a focus that doesn't shake under pressure, a peace that doesn't need an audience. That's the kind of strength you find in the disciplined soul of someone who's connected to something greater than themselves. Not just through words, but through consistent action. Discipline is one of the highest forms of spiritual warfare, because every time you say no to your lower desires, you say yes to a higher calling. Every time you choose prayer over panic, modesty over attention, silence over reaction, you train your soul, you strip away ego, you refine your focus. The world might not celebrate it. In fact, the world might mock it. But deep down, even the critics are watching. Even the loudest voices in the room pause when they see someone who walks with quiet strength, not because they agree, but because they recognize something rare. They see a person who isn't driven by impulse, someone who isn't reacting to every notification, every temptation, every trend, someone who's built from the inside out. That kind of person is not common. They're not constantly switching lanes to match the pace of culture. They're moving in rhythm with eternity. They don't rush, they don't panic, and they don't bend every time the pressure increases, because their life isn't built on the sand of society's approval. It's built on the rock of sacred submission. They don't need everyone to understand their values. They just need to live them. They don't need applause to feel whole. They don't need validation to stay grounded. What anchors them is their relationship with their Creator. What fuels them is the reminder that this life is temporary and discipline now brings eternal reward. It's not that they don't struggle. It's that they choose to rise anyway. It's not that they don't feel the pull of desire. It's that they've learned the strength of restraint. They've tasted the joy of obedience. They've seen the power of consistency. And because of that, they've learned to protect their peace, to preserve their dignity, to guard their time and energy. Their lives aren't chaotic. Their emotions aren't constantly hijacked by external noise. There's a stillness to them, a depth, a patience, and it's not weakness, it's wisdom. People often assume freedom means doing whatever you want, but ask anyone who's lived that way and they'll tell you, there's no peace in being a slave to your urges. True freedom is found in mastery. Not of others, but of yourself. And that's what disciplined people have discovered, that the real enemy isn't outside, it's within. The battle is in the soul, and those who win that battle walk differently. They speak with clarity, they move with intention, they don't waste time proving themselves to a world that's constantly shifting. They've already found their foundation. That's the power of spiritual discipline. It's not visible to everyone, but it's deeply felt. It's not loud, but it's undeniable. It's not trendy, but it's timeless, and the world may never fully understand it, but it will always notice it. Because a person who has disciplined their soul is a person who cannot be conquered. There is a kind of power that doesn't roar, doesn't boast, doesn't dominate headlines or trends. It's the kind of power that sits quietly inside a person, steady and immovable, rooted in something ancient and sacred. And when the storms of life rise, that person doesn't run, they don't panic, they don't crumble, because their strength doesn't come from the outside. It comes from a place far deeper. It's the kind of strength that comes from knowing who you are, and more importantly, whose you are. That kind of strength is formed in discipline, in worship, in the secret moments no one sees. That's the untold power of a spiritually grounded soul, and when it's lived with intention, it becomes something the world can't quite explain. You see it in the way they walk, how they move through a noisy world with quiet confidence. You see it in how they handle pressure, not by reacting with emotion, but by responding with purpose. You see it in the way they choose silence over shouting, patience over panic, boundaries over approval. That's not passive. That's not weakness. That's someone who has decided that their values won't be traded for likes, that their peace won't be sold for attention. They've learned how to carry themselves with grace because they've surrendered their ego. They've tasted the bitterness of temptation and chosen the sweetness of obedience, and that obedience doesn't make them smaller. It sets them free. In a culture that says indulge, they say restrain. In a world that says be seen, they say be sincere. In a time where everyone is rushing to be everything, they are content to be faithful. That doesn't come from casual belief, it comes from deep conviction. The kind that gets up early to pray when no one's watching. The kind that fasts not to impress, but to discipline the soul. The kind that lives modestly in a world that's addicted to display. That's power that doesn't look like power until it's tested. Because when life shakes, when trials come, when the noise gets louder, that's when you see the difference. You see the ones who are rooted, the ones who don't shift with public opinion, the ones who have built their identity on something that doesn't change. They don't need to prove their strength, they live it. They don't argue about their beliefs, they embody them. And because they've mastered the art of saying no to themselves, they've become the kind of people who can lead others. That kind of leadership doesn't demand attention, it commands respect, not because of what it says, but because of how it lives. There's a reason the world is unsettled by that kind of discipline, because it reminds us that we were never meant to live at the mercy of our feelings. It reminds us that true peace doesn't come from chasing everything. We find it when we choose the right things. When someone chooses submission to their faith over submission to their desires, it shakes the systems that rely on our weakness. It confuses a culture that thrives on impulse, because if you can't be bought, can't be manipulated, can't be distracted, then you're a threat to the very structure of what this world values. So the ones who choose that path, who walk it daily, who stumble but keep getting back up, who choose worship over worry and reverence over relevance. They may not make noise, but they make impact. And when the noise dies down, when the show fades, when everyone else is exhausted from trying to keep up, these are the ones still standing, not because they're perfect, but because they were anchored. And you can't move someone who's been anchored in something holy. You can't intimidate someone who's been trained by surrender. You can't break someone whose strength isn't on the surface, but in the spirit, so when the world wonders why some walk with such unshakable strength, let them look closer, not at titles, fame, or fortune, but at the fire of discipline, the peace of submission, the power of unwavering faith. That's the untold strength they weren't ready for. That's the spirit the world didn't expect, but cannot ignore, and it's not just meant to be admired, it's meant to be lived.